we're here with Charlie Covell. Hi, Charlie. Thank you for being with us. We are very excited to have you. You are a writer and an actress, and you wrote The End of the Fucking World. And your new show is, I think, was set to shoot in June. It's probably postponed. It's called Kaos, and it will be on Netflix sometime soon. Or later. Yeah. So you are a writer and an actress. As I said, how did you know that that's what you want to be? And when did you know that you want to write and act?
Well, I think thanks for having me, first of all. It's really nice to, well, not be here physically, but be part of it. I think I was a huge show off when I was a child. And I loved, performing stuff and making people laugh. And yeah, I think it was just started off like that as a kid. And then I started doing plays at school. I went to the National Youth Theatre, which was wonderful when I was about 15 or 16. And then I went to university and I was in plays, and then I got an agent. So I think I knew from quite a young age. And then I'd always written, um, I'd always written kind of short stories and stuff, but never showed them to anyone. And then I think when I was in my 20s, I got asked to be part of a group of actors and writers who would just make stuff. And we did scratch nights at theatres in London. Um, there was no money in it. We was just trying stuff out, and I started writing. And the first plays I wrote were these short little, sounds very pretentious. They were kind of modern retellings of Greek myths set in a contemporary setting. I've always been obsessed with Greek myths, so the Chaos series is a kind of long held dream of mine, really. But that's the first thing I started writing. And then I got some really lucky breaks. So it wasn't like a planned thing, but I think often it's not for people.
So your first big show, I know you wrote a film before, and you wrote another series before, but The End of the Fucking World. How did you find that? Did you find the novel, or how did you become the writer of that show, or one of the writers of that show?
I just went for an interview. So I'd done a show called Banana for Russell T Davies. That was my first TV job, which was great, and a really amazing experience. And then I think so Clerkenwell and Dominic Buchanan Productions were looking to make End of the Fucking World and adapt it for TV. And I just got put up for it, and I got sent the graphic novel, which I loved. I think Chuck is a brilliant writer and illustrator, and I just loved it. So I guess I pitched for it, and then I wrote all of the first season and all of the second season. Um, it was wonderful, but it was yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't my idea. I can't take credit for that. I just adapted something really cool.
But you did come up with original elements to the show. I remember
Yeah,
you
yeah,
mentioned that, like the two cups,
yeah.
who I really like, by the way. Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
And um, and how your work on the first season and the second season, how did that develop? Was that, and how was the process with The End of the Fucking World? Did you deliver the script and got notes for it, and did you get notes from Channel 4 and Netflix, or just the producers? How was that process?
So, oh God, it was a long time ago now. I mean, I think the way it worked, so the first series it was an adaptation of the book, but like you say, with changes and with new characters and stuff. But lots of it was very faithful to the book, and that was great to have the guide. And obviously in series two, it was all invention. Although Bonnie is kind of tied to a character who we
Mm-hmm.
took out of the first series, who does appear in the book. So she was based on one of Chuck's ideas, which made it feel rooted in the world. But in terms of the kind of process, like you mentioned, I think I would, you'd outline an episode. I would outline an episode. I'd then get that signed off, I'd write it, and then yeah, we get notes from Channel 4 and Netflix. And normally what happens is if you're a writer and you don't have a kind of producerial role, the notes will come through the production company, but they'll come from Netflix, from Channel 4, and then there'll be internal notes from the producers, and they'll all come to me when someone's kind of filtered them. And then I think when you get to a more, like I was an EP on series 2, then you do tend to see notes more boldly. They don't get filtered, so you see what people really think. No, the notes are always very polite, and they were, they did, even if I find it with notes, even if you initially balk at something and go, oh my God, why do they want me to change that? It's always what's behind the note. It's like, why is that question being asked? It means that that's not clear. And even if you don't necessarily agree with the suggestion, you can find another solution to answer the note. So it's useful to know what people have a problem with and what isn't landing, because often you think something's working and it's not.
And how was the writing process?
It was really important to me that we credited all of the people coming up with the stories. So it's so I think season 1, it's like, I can't remember who, but I think season 2, I'm just remembering that's the most recent. It was Ed McDonald, Andy Baker, and Emily Harrison, and me, who are credited for the story. So we would come up with the ideas together, like a kind of, like a mini writer's room, and then I go away and write it. So that's kind of how that was shared. But it felt like it was a very collaborative thing. So that it felt like it was important to reflect that in the credits.
In general, when you work, how do you find ideas? How do you find out what you want to write? So I would have asked you, how did you come up with Kaos? But you kind of already touched upon it.
So I don't know. I think I come up with ideas all the time, just from reading stuff or thinking about something. Often something will pop into my head at night. So I have a kind of, there's loads of notebooks all over the place and files on my computer with kind of random ideas and things like titles for stuff. I've got like I'm never going to use them, but I've got a list of titles that I think sound good, which I kind of stow away. So Kaos is basically anyone who is like a purist about Greek mythology will hate the show and shouldn't watch it. I should warn now, because it's using the Greek myths as a jumping off point, and we are playing fast and loose and reinventing stuff. And yeah, if you're a purist, stay away. But and I think the ideas, well, for that, the ideas came from me and from lots of the co-EPs, and we have a writers' room for that show. So we sat, and worked things out for 9 or 10 weeks, and also because on a show that size, it's an iterative process. Because obviously, end of the fucking world, you only have really 2 protagonists, and they're on the same journey. And then in series 2, you have a third protagonist slash antagonist who joins them, but it is a kind of coherent one narrative. Well, hopefully, it's coherent. And then in Chaos, it's more of that, like, kind of more of a Game of Thrones size show. So it's a whole world. You have gods, humans, you've got the underworld. And so that can be a real, I don't want to say mess, but sometimes it feels like, in my head, it's like, how on earth is that going to connect to that? So I think so sometimes we come up with big picture ideas for how the world should look, or what are the rules of the underworld? How does death work? Things like that, who believes in reincarnation? And then you have ideas about particular characters or small story events that will happen, and then there's all the texture in the world and how we make it feel new and interesting. And like with anything that's kind of contemporary, like I loved Watchmen. I don't know if you've seen the HBO series. I think the way they do a kind of alternative now is so clever and has been a huge inspiration. So I have ideas that just come. I'm quite lucky in that I think a lot of stuff just comes up, which is great. And I read a lot and I watch a lot. So lockdown, I've just been going through everything that's been on my list for years, which has been, a good thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. You describe Chaos as a show. The references you quote are for the tone, The End of the Fucking World, for the look, Romeo and Juliet by Baz Luhrmann, and for the style, Game of Thrones. That sounds definitely very, very ambitious, very exciting. And I think the tone in The End of the Fucking World is really, really unique. And it was one of the things that made me love the show. In another interview, someone asked you about that tone and said that he feels it comes, you write that tone feels like confidence. And then you answered that that confidence also comes from the people you work with, from the director and the DOP. But how is that in the development process? How do you handle the tone? Is that something you're aware of, or do you just write it and then?
Well, I think it's always collaborative when something's good. I mean, I think of course you have auteurs who have complete control over, say, a movie or perhaps even a series. I think for me, anything I've worked on that's worked has been because there is a kind of collective vision, and I mean, obviously you have disagreements, but there's people working together, and the tone is something that everyone understands and shares. So, for example, I always knew on End of the World, John's tone, style, visual style was always clear to me because I'd seen the short film he'd made. He made a tone Bible. We talked about some of the music that he'd been influenced by. He'd spoken a lot to Chuck, who wrote the graphic novel. They had a playlist they'd made years ago. So it felt like from the word go, there was a kind of collective understanding of the world we were in and how we wanted it to be. And we talked a lot about references to other films or TV series. So it felt like it was pretty coherent from the word go. And of course, then carrying that into season 2, they have a big style Bible that DOP team had given to the guys filming season 2. So again, there was that kind of passing on the baton. And there were people like me who'd been on both seasons, and of course the actors. So there's the sense that you keep the feel of the project authentic and don't change it. We had to develop it, but we didn't want to move too far away from what the first series had felt like. So with Chaos, I think it's just constantly, like the references you said, Baz Luhrmann, I've rewatched it so many times now just to keep the feeling of that film and that world. That's a reference I give to anyone who joins the show. Game of Thrones kind of for scale rather than tone, I would say. And then, but yeah, I think with End of the World, basically because with something like Chaos, we're dealing with inevitably some dark or serious themes because it's about gods and abuse of power, and you read the myths, like they're not cheerful necessarily. So it's taking that material, like I said, we are playing fast and loose with it, but the themes are still there. And so sorry, I'm rambling, but I think what I found with End of the World, if you just look at End of the World as a story, it's really dark and there's not much levity in it when you just consider what happens. And then but what we were trying to do in the tone, which is what Chuck does in the book, is you use this humor to balance. So I think whenever something could teeter into being too dark or too sentimental, you kind of bring it back with a not just a gag, but a moment of dark or truthful comedy, hopefully. And that can be visual, it's not just in the script. And so you're kind of treading that line. And I think that's what I would hope to do in Chaos. So it needs to be fun and playful as well as dark. And I think the stuff I love the most, I mean, like Watchmen is a good example. I think that series is superlative. It's just wonderful. And I think they balance comedy and really high drama so well. Yeah.
Why is Chaos, or what are the themes in Chaos that are important to you? Is there anything that you feel is important to tell, or anything you particularly want to convey?
I think if I say it, it's all going to sound so heavy, so forgive me. I don't know how good I am at describing it, but I think at its core, it's about abuse of power and about certain people on the earth realizing that they can rise up against that power without giving too much away. Um, so it feels kind of timely, and it's about
Mm-hmm.
people working together. I mean, I'm going to make it sound really earnest if you just hear it out of context, but yeah, I think it's about lots of people who've been disenfranchised or othered. There's a sort of natural elite in this world, and then there are people who are suffering, and it's about you know certain people waking up and wanting to challenge that power structure, basically. So that feels important. That's the kind of the key thing, and all sorts of different abuses of power occur in this world,
Mm-hmm.
and the ways in which people deal with it or respond to it, they're different. But that's probably a central theme of the show, I think, which feels, I mean, it's always timely, but it feels particularly timely at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And is it and I'm sorry I didn't find out anything about that. Is it a linear show?
It's basically yeah, it's linear. It's linear, but
Mm-hmm.
it's operating in different worlds. Yeah.
Yeah.
But and there's stuff, there's flashbacks and stuff, but it is, yeah, it's essentially it moves forward in a normal fashion, yeah.
Mm-hmm. How do you describe the development work for Chaos, that you worked in a writer's room, um, and that sounds that was probably different from the end of the fucking world, and it also seems like a show of a much bigger scale. Was that something that affected the your work on it, or the everyday work? Or what, did it feel very similar?
No, it felt different. I think, like you say, because End of the World is kind of not it's like it's a more singular authored piece, I guess. But it wasn't just my voice, it was Chuck's
Mm-hmm.
voice, and kind of trying to channel that. So I think the thing with Chaos is, and I always knew this, was if you're doing a show about the whole world, I haven't got near anything near the experience to be able to pull that off, because it's a bigger show, so you need more voices, you need diverse
Mm-hmm.
voices, you need people who don't look like me, don't have my life experience to be in that room, because the show will be the poorer for it if you don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it was about finding really excellent writers who kind of they read my pilot, which was I wrote ages ago, which I now would be embarrassed to show anyone because the show's moved on a lot, but whatever we had at the time, people read it and responded to it, and people who'd liked End of the World, so kind of got the tone. And so we met some fantastic people, and it's quite a big room. I think in total there are 8 or 9 of us. Sorry, my maths is bad. I'm trying to count on my, yeah, I think I'm writing 2 scripts, co-writing one, and then there's 7 other writers, so there's 8 other writers in total. Um, and yeah, it just felt really vital that it was a mixed bunch of people, basically.
Where is the writers' room? Because it's a UK US production, right?
It was in London, yeah. So we had it was God,
Mm-hmm.
it was nearly a year ago now. I think because time feels very odd. I'm sure it does for you, but I think it was August, September last year. But I was also straddling End of the World being in post, so it was quite a I was running. We got a room that was very near the editing suite for End of the World, so I could run between the two. There was kind of about 2 or 3 weeks where it was full on. Um, but I'm very lucky to be doing that much work. But there were a couple of days where I didn't really know what was going on. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. What do you do, especially when you write, when you don't, and you're stuck, or you don't, not every day is the same. So, what do you do when you feel you don't progress in your writing the way you want to?
Yeah, well, I think sometimes I think it's just important just to write something. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm struggling, it depends what I'm doing. If I'm writing a script, I try to just get on with it, and just even if it's total shit, I just go, get through it, get through it. You can always go back and change it. Sometimes finishing it is the thing. And if I'm doing outlines or trying to work out bigger story strands, sometimes you just need to leave it, maybe go for a run, do some exercise, read a book, whatever, you know. I think I think I probably am a workaholic. So I always feel like I should be doing something. But yeah, just write. Sometimes I just write anything. I maybe start writing a journal or read an article and just write anything that occurs to me having read it, just so I'm kind of thinking and generating stuff. I find it really hard to sit still and just, you know, have faith that ideas will come. I think I panic. But I'm one of those annoying people that, you know, wakes up and writes stuff down. And yeah, I think the main thing for me is to keep going, and then probably forcing myself to take a break if it feels like I'm just not getting anywhere, because sometimes you do just need a rest and a sleep and to do something else. I find cooking quite therapeutic as a way to switch off a bit, and I think using a different part of your brain. Walking as well. I think walking is a great way to just mull on stuff.
And you mentioned that from the second season on, the end of the fucking world, and now also for Kaos, you're a producer role, or you're an EP role. Did you enjoy that? And how has your influence on the show changed, or was it easier for you to bring in ideas? Could you bring in other aspects, like music?
Oh yeah. Well, so on the first season, they were really generous actually. Clerkenwell and Dominic were really open to me suggesting stuff, even giving my thoughts about casting. You know, they were always very generous. And I don't know if all production companies are like that. And they made me an associate producer after the series went out, which was very nice of them. And so the second season, yeah, I think I probably had more, I don't know, influence is the right word, but maybe more of a say more of the time. But they are a very collaborative bunch of people, so I don't know. But yeah, the music, I always write any script I write tracks in that I'd love to put in, and I send a playlist with anything I write, just so that people have a sense of how I'd want a moment to feel, or just to what I'm trying to get at, you know. And that might be something that I know we could never afford, or something that's a bit, whatever it is. So, but the music, we've got Matt Biffer, who is brilliant, was the music supervisor on End of the World, and he's also going to do Chaos. And Graham Coxon, of course, Blur fame, did some composition. So the music wasn't my area, but I certainly fed into decisions and stuff. Yeah, it was kind of a team effort. And do I like it? So I'm a control freak, so sometimes I really like it. And then other days I'm like, I just wish this wasn't my problem, which I think is quite normal. Sometimes you just want to go, I'd love to write it and give it over. And some days I really resent the responsibility and I wish someone else was doing it. But I think that's normal, probably.
Yeah, I think so. Is there anything you recommend to upcoming writers? How best to present their work? You know, things, how to deal with passes on their work.
I think I would always say have a load of stuff that you are working on. Obviously, you will have projects that are kind of further along, or things that are maybe nearer ready to go. But I find always have more than one idea when you go into a pitch. If someone doesn't like that, and you can say, well, there's also this idea I'm working on. I think from my experience, the first time you get knocked back is really galling. But if you have loads of other stuff you're working on, even if it's just for you, you have a sense of generating things and feeling like, well, I've got that project or that project. I think if you have all your eggs in one basket and it gets turned down, it can be quite destabilizing, because it feels like a rejection of you. I think that, and also the important thing is also to delineate, like, it's not a rejection of you, it's a rejection of a piece of your work. I think it's important to try and separate yourself from what you're writing sometimes, because otherwise you know, I think, and I mean, I think it's easier as a writer than an actor, because like an actor, you feel like when you get turned down, they're literally turning down you, where I'm going, do you want that? And people say no. I'm like, well, it's it's a piece of my work. So yeah, I think having a healthy sense of also it takes time. You know, you can be working a long time before someone makes something of yours. I think I'd recommend reading and watching as much as you possibly can, and also downloading scripts and watching them alongside, reading them alongside watching them. There's so many pilots available online. I think some screenwriting books are fantastic if that's your thing. Like Save the Cat is great, and I think Into the Woods is great. But you know, some people don't necessarily want to read those books. The thing that I have found recently, I realize I'm much more interested in just how characters feel, and like I would always just write a scene where basically nothing happens, and like what I've learned recently, people going, you have to move the plot. Like what and like, does it matter? They can just sit and feel things. I was like, no, it's really boring. So I think it's really good to spot your weaknesses and your blind spots, and try and focus on. So like narrative arcs for me, I kind of go, oh God, I've got to think about how someone's changed rather than just going, you know, thinking it's fine that someone hasn't altered for 2 episodes, because it is probably quite boring to watch. So yeah, I think it's working out your own weaknesses and getting people to tell you. I think it's I think also share drafts before they're ready with people you trust, because the only way things get better is by you showing them. I think it's easy to be nervous and a bit precious, but maybe precious isn't the right word, but you know, you don't show someone something because you're frightened of rejection, but you're never going to get better if you don't share your stuff. So, and I think if you know, people who, if you know actors, get actors to read stuff, organize a reading, even if it's really informal, you just, you know, have people around to read in a house, or if you can get a space somewhere. That I think just sharing stuff and getting people to read it before you necessarily feel ready, because it's scary, and you do need to be a bit brave and make that leap. But yeah, it's that's the main thing I would recommend, I think.
And then my last question, what are you excited about for the future of film and television?
I think I don't know at the moment, because it feels like what is, I like to know that there is a future for film and television.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm excited to see I think I'm excited to see creators and stories that have always been kind of other uh, becoming protagonists and creators. So like, you know, you've seen this in the last, you know, 20, 30 years, you know, you'd never be allowed a gay protagonist in a mainstream show because they were always the best friend, and now that's become a nonsense. And you seeing stories that wouldn't have been told, and seeing filmmakers that wouldn't have been championed. And I think that that's happening more and more. Maybe, well, definitely not fast enough, but I feel like at the moment we're at an exciting point in history where those voices are going to be platformed and championed. And so I think there's going to be an explosion of stories we have never heard. And I think that's really exciting, because they're stories that should be told. And yeah, I'm excited to see, you know, new voices, and yeah, just yeah.
Thank you very much, Charlie. We are very, very happy to have you at this year's edition of Series. We're very honored that you have joined us, and thank you very, very much for this conversation.
Well, thank you very much for having me, and I'm really honored to have been a part of it. Thanks.